what we kind of want to talk about today is it's along the theme of how incredibly important it is for green tech scale-ups to commercially scale, right? There are many things that need to be done to solve the massive environmental crisis we're in, you know, from regulation to changing consumer and corporate behavior, etc., etc. But if all the great green tech innovations, sustainability companies out there, and there's so many, could commercially scale and get their products and services out into the market, that would make a massive impact. The challenge is, and there are so many great innovations out there, like yourselves, that we'll talk about in a minute. There is a lot of green capital, so investment being pumped into green sustainability scale-ups. There are also a lot of passionate people driving the agenda, like yourselves and the team at Qnect. But what we've noticed is one of the big challenges is commercially scaling and going from a startup to a scale-up, and then from a scale-up into, you know, commercial scaling and getting the service and products out there fully, right? And we're going to talk about why that's a challenge a bit later on. But I wanted to just kind of switch attention over to you and to your really cool company and product. And maybe you can just tell us and the listeners about kind of Qnect.
So Qnect, it has been building technology to solve a pretty big problem in the construction space. Projects are, you know, usually over budget and take longer than they're supposed to. So they've got a schedule, a time problem, and a cost problem.
So construction projects, right? So they're building a hospital, or they're building a data center, or they're building, yeah?
Exactly. It could be anything from a school to a skyscraper, or,
yep.
You know, we're working on a couple of airport projects now. So these big projects, or even small projects, we're working on a really small project, they all have the same issues. And that is that they take too long and they cost too much. And we've built some software that really helps with that big problem. You know, conventionally, you know, people will, you know, take a model of a building. They'll start to build the model, and the engineer will put the right forces and the right geometry for the we call it the sticks, the beams, the columns of the building to go together.
That holds the building, like the stable foundation of the building, right?
Yeah, exactly. Buildings need to be engineered, and that's the first step. But the earlier you can sort of identify what problems there might be with the connections, because the connections drive everything. If you can't connect the steel, you know, you're not going to be able to build the steel. Connections are a critical item on the path to putting up any steel building. And so our software engineers those connections accurately, consistently, and most importantly, quickly. Yep. Based on the inputs from the engineers, we design the connections and we instantly put them back into the 3D model. And this enables a whole shift in the way things are done, from the traditional way of doing it, you know, further downstream to doing it upstream.
Can you explain that? So when you say down, so the traditional way of doing this, so the what we call the category that's always been utilized, when you say doing it downstream versus upstream, just kind of explain that.
Sure. So traditionally, the engineer will give a set of drawings to a fabricator. The fabricator will then hire a connection engineer, a detailer, and those subcontractors will then get to work on, you know, designing the connections, engineering them, and putting them into a 3D model.
Yeah.
And that takes weeks. It takes many weeks. And it happens traditionally after the fabricator is selected. And, you know, in that case, there's many weeks that are lost on the project. And if those weeks are captured and moved up front earlier in the early design phase of the project, then we can deliver not only the weeks of schedule improvement, but weeks more from solving the problems early. And then, many dollars get also delivered to the project because there aren't all of the RFIs, which tend to cost as much as $1,000 for RFI. RFI stands for Request for Information.
Yep.
And so a lot of information needs to be, worked through between the engineer and the connection engineer and fabricator. And all these people are working through to answer questions, to solve issues later on, which causes delays. And delays cost money. One of my favorite engineers, Jef Sharp at WSP, says, time is money. And one of the things that he likes most about what we do is that we save time. We save time because we've taken the entire AISC manual of connections, how to design a connection. There's 3,500 pages in this manual, and we've digitized it. So now it's in our software. And so instead of having to leaf through the manual and find out what the calculations are and, sort of more manually do it, we've made it automatic with our software.
Got it.
It's almost instant.
And what impact, so doing it the traditional way, what impact also does it have, like, environmentally?
Well, great question. By doing it early and by doing it digitally and accurately, we're able to, first of all, have the time to see what issues could be solved and what connections could be done in a more efficient way, which helps with the material. And then when we connect all of the connections early, we know the exact length of the steel that needs to be ordered. So traditionally, they would order the steel sort of center line to center line between columns or between beams. And they would have to put in a little bit of cushion on each end because they don't know what the connection is. And if you need to get the steel ordered, because that can be one of the bottlenecks to getting the project built, then you have to order it not knowing the exact length. Well, if we make the connections happen early because of the software and because of our speed and accuracy, now you can order the steel in exact lengths and reduce the amount of steel. And if you reduce the amount of steel, you reduce the amount of embodied carbon in the project.
Got it. And just to understand, when we're talking about reduce the amount of steel, if you're building a hospital or a skyscraper, that's a lot of steel, right? So it's not just like a couple of meters of steel we're talking about here. I mean, it is tons and tons of steel that could be...
Tons or hundreds of tons of steel.
Yeah.
And steel, as you know, is one of the biggest abusers of carbon emission.
Yeah.
Carbon footprint of all the materials that you can build with. Not quite as bad as concrete, but it's, the construction industry is responsible for about 40% of the carbon emissions.
And then what happens with the tons and tons of excess steel? So you do it the traditional way, and you've ordered too much steel. What do you do with the excess steel?
Well, traditionally, they cut it off in the shop, and then the steel that's left over gets recycled again. But, that takes even more carbon. You've got to melt it down. You've got to turn it back into, beams or columns again, or car parts or whatever it is that you're using it for. And so that it's not the most efficient thing to do in terms of reducing embodied carbon is to use less materials.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where Qnect comes in, because we've digitized everything. We've made it easy to optimize the length of the steel and also optimize the plate material and the bolts that are used on a project. We did a project recently where we saved 30,000 bolts. That's a lot of embodied carbon savings, because imagine, all of the processes that go into making those bolts.
Yeah, and then shipping them and,
Yeah, exactly. There's transportation costs. There's the bolts that get lost somewhere along the way, so they have to order more bolts. I mean, it's a long tail.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, and I don't know if you know this, but do you have like on average in a project, and maybe this is impossible to say, how much steel and then how much carbon emissions you actually save by using your category of solution, your way of doing it, versus kind of like, ordering an excess amount of steel for a project?
Yeah, so we've done some studies and looked at the data as best we can, and really it ranges between 5 and 15% of the steel that gets saved by optimizing the project.
Okay.
5% doesn't sound like a lot, but if you measure it in tons of steel and the amount of carbon that can go into that, it can make a significant difference.
Yeah, and if you let's just kind of go for an utopia. If every single project in the world used, like you say, 15% for one project, but if every single project in the world shifted from the traditional way of designing to, what you guys are bringing to the table, that's 15% times, I don't know how much. And that, it equates to an enormous amount of savings in carbon, right? So that's what we mean by commercial scaling. So if you guys could be involved in every single, I know it's an utopia, but if you guys can be involved in every single project across the world, it's huge, right? What can we say?
And you're actually spending less to do it. So that's the beauty here.
Yeah.
You're saving all this steel, all this carbon, and you're making money while doing it.
Yeah.
Because you're just by shifting some of the workflow from later to earlier, you're saving all this. And then the other thing that Qnect has is a product called Qnect for Revit, where it will put in the hands of every engineer in the country, every structural engineer in the world, in fact, 750,000 structural engineers, the ability to look early at the connections and the difference between the carbon footprint of one connection versus another, make decisions early in the design stage of the building to improve the carbon footprint. This is going to be a game changer. This is a new product that we're just announcing at the Steel Show in about a week.
Awesome. No, that's amazing. So you told us a bit about how traditionally this type of design is done and what the negative consequences of that is, and the amazing category that you've brought, the new category that you've brought into the market. Is there anything else apart from the cost, the time, and obviously the massive carbon footprint that can be saved that you want to kind of talk about for your solution? And and on top of that, maybe you want to walk. Does it make sense to walk through how you guys do it with your technology?
Well, there's cost, there's schedule, there's carbon. We also save risk. We reduce the amount of uncertainty in a project.
Yep.
And the uncertainty, the largest general contractor in the country told us recently, he said, our biggest issue is uncertainty.
Yeah.
And if you can help with that, then, you're going to talk about scaling. Take the largest general contractor in the U.S. If they scale this across every one of their projects, what kind of an impact it could have by eliminating the uncertainty of the connections, the amount of steel, the amount of carbon. I mean, a lot of projects are really sensitive to the carbon footprints today. They're asking us questions like, does this get LEED points? Leadership in Environment and Energy Design, U.S. government program. And the answer is sort of, it can get LEED points, not directly, but indirectly it can help with LEED points. And so we're getting all of this interest because of the elimination of uncertainty of all of these areas. Because we've digitized everything, we can now run connections super fast. We can connect a whole 30, 50, 80-story building in less than 3 hours.
Yep.
Just to look at where the issues might be. And not only can we connect the whole building in less than 3 hours, but we can connect it 9, 10 or more times in less than 3 hours. So, normally it would take many weeks, if not months, to do this. And thanks to, sort of generative design, it's verging on artificial intelligence. We can do this super fast. You've all used ChatGPT and how fast that works. Well, think of our technology working that quickly to design the connections, as opposed to how long it would take to, write your essay by hand. It's not exactly the right comparison, but it uses the same technology. We use large servers, crunch the numbers in the cloud, and we come back with reports to give data to the people who are making the decisions to make smarter decisions on the kind of connection that they want to use for this building, the size of the bolts. When we look at many scenarios of connecting the building, we look at multiple bolt choice possibilities, and you'd be surprised at how many bolts can be saved just by changing the bolt diameter by 1/4 of an inch.
Okay.
So you have to look at many scenarios of bolt combinations to come up with the most economical one, and also the one that saves the most material/carbon.
Got it. Cool. Well, look, Jef, thanks for sharing that. I think it's crystal clear. Like, you guys are a perfect example of, a sustainability scale up. You've introduced a disruptive new technology that, if it's adopted in the market, if it's commercially scaled, it could make a huge impact within green construction. And as you say, it's one of the absolute biggest emitters of carbon in the world. So thanks for sharing that, Jef. So if we shift gears a little bit, as I was sharing before, one of the key challenges that we observe in the market for companies like yourself is that, as I was saying before, it's a great innovation. There definitely is a demand in the market. That there's capital out there. I know you've raised it a couple of times, and you guys are incredibly passionate to drive this agenda, right? But there is, what we see often with companies like yourselves is they have these 3 complexities that we talk about. And, it's one of the reasons why we've partnered together, right? And that is, we call it the rainmaker dependency. So when you have this type of a complex cell, and yours is incredibly complex. I mean, you have so many players in the ecosystem that you need to influence, that it's just, and let's not even get into that, because we could probably spend a whole podcast just talking about that, right? But that complexity then is incredibly dependent on you and, maybe 1 or 2 more in the company that needs to be involved to orchestrate these deals. It's not that easy. And you've done that, right? Hiring more and more salespeople, it's just not the solution, right? It's incredibly hard. The second challenge is you have a finite market, right? I mean, you're very targeted on a few set of players that make up the big majority of your potential market, right? And you have the third complexity as well, which is you're introducing and building a brand new category that doesn't exist, right? So then you have these lovely pragmatists out there that they think it's so cool and great, but they're like, who else is doing this? And they don't want to be first, but they don't want to be last, right? And so these 3 complexities, maybe you want to just kind of like, I know you and I talk frequently and we work together, but maybe you just want to kind of share a little about these 3 complexities in your business.
Sure. So it is a finite market. There's, it's a big market. The construction business in the U.S. is quite large, and then there's no reason why we can't take this to the rest of the world. But there are key players that can really drive change, and so we need to concentrate on those players, and we need to do it with, as you call it, the rainmakers in the company, the people who really understand all of the elements, who can tell the story. You can't just grab a salesperson and teach them this stuff quickly. And so you have to have a sort of a higher level approach to selling. You're meeting with very high level people in these companies, try to sell an enterprise deal to the entire organization. And so it needs to be, an emphasis placed on the key people who are relatable to these higher level people. I think that's pretty important. If you have a C-level person talking to a C-level person, you might make progress faster.
Can I just add one thing there also? One of the things that I observe with you guys is because you're selling a brand new category, one of the things that we observe, and I think it's relevant for you, is that when you're selling a new category, is a very different sell to selling an existing category in a mature, normalized industry, right? So, for example, if you're selling a CRM, I never need to influence people higher up in the organization why they should invest in a CRM, like everybody gets it. What I need to do is I need to talk to people further down in the organization, explain why should they pick my CRM versus another CRM, right? But when you're selling a new category, there's an added complexity because you need to influence stakeholders higher up in the organization on why they should pick your type of solution versus the traditional solution that you were referring to before, right? And the second thing is you need to sell the category. It's not enough to just sell the product and the features of the product. So you need to, you need to align to how they make decisions and explain why they should pick this category. Once you achieve that, selling the actual product is easier, right? So these two things are so higher up in the organization and sell the category versus, you still need to sell the product, but first you need to sell the category. Do you agree? And can you talk to us a bit about that in your sales process?
Absolutely. The new category that we are selling is the early connected model. So as opposed to a late connected model, we're selling an early connected model. And that's new. People are uncomfortable with things that are new until you tell them all the advantages, and then they warm up to it pretty quickly. But having to sell a new category like that makes our job more challenging. Luckily, with the software, we're able to, create quite a bit of data to prove out why selling the connected model early makes a lot of sense for the project. But it's still challenging. It's not you're not just going in there and selling a better widget. You're selling a widget that sort of has a whole different. It comes in at a different level, and so that's something that we've been grappling with, and we're using Megadeals to help us get to the right people with the right message, because it's we're not trying to sell something that the world doesn't need or that won't help the industry. It's very clear that if there was a customer that was the project, and we get to the key decision maker of that project, that we could sell a very sensible solution to that person or that project. Right. There are many stakeholders. There are many players involved. Starting from the owner to the architect to the general contractor to the engineer to the fabricator, the detailer, sometimes a connection engineer. There's a lot of people that need to sort of understand why this makes sense, and they have the potential to derail it if they don't like it for some reason. And some of these people will lose some of the income stream that they normally are expecting. We believe that they pick up much more income stream by getting more business, but sometimes that's hard to convince the middle levels at a company.
Awesome. So look, Jef, we're coming towards the end of the session. We've spent a good bit of time talking about the urgency of scaling companies like yourself. You've spent a good bit of time talking about what you guys do and what new category you're coming with. And you've also shared with us, I think, you've kind of acknowledged the challenges of the rainmaker dependency, the finite market, and the kind of category building, right? Based on this, so based on, number one, we really want to scale green tech companies. You're incredibly experienced, Jef. I mean, this is not the first company you're building. So, I mean, you're not a new kid on the block. I mean, you've done this a couple of times. You're really smart. You're experienced, and still it's hard, right? So, what are the maybe one or two lessons or takeaways that you want to share with other business leaders, founders, CEOs that are also struggling with trying to scale their green tech sustainability scale up, that also face these three challenges of rainmaker dependency, finite market, and category building? What is the final one or two things you would, the wisdom of Jef that you would like to leave behind?
Well, first of all, it takes a team. It takes a team of people, whether you're talking about going in and, getting to the right levels at an organization to sell them, or just the back end people. I mean, that every company that I've ever started or run, I'm probably the least and most important person in the company. I mean, it takes a really great group of people. You need to identify who they are, and then you need to train them, or give them the ability to train themselves. So the second thing I'll mention is that it's constant, continuous learning that gets you to the next level. One great thing about Megadeals is that, they have not only brought us systems and methodologies for breaking through some of these bottlenecks, but they've trained a lot of people in the company to understand and to incorporate, this new way of thinking. So those are important lessons. And then the other one is, just to have passion and for what you do, and to be genuine about what you do, and if you really believe that you can change the world in a positive way, be persistent. Pivot when you need to, listen to your audience and your customers, make changes to satisfy them, but don't let go of what's really important to you. And in closing, I just want to say that, in addition to it being great to work with Megadeals and the team there, I also feel positive about working with a Swedish company to drive sustainability initiatives. You guys are leaders in sustainability and green thinking, and it's refreshing.
Jef, thank you so much with those kind words, and thank you so much for taking the time to get on and really share both about your great business and what you're doing to try and drive sustainability in the construction space. Thanks for coming and sharing so openly around that, and also thanks for sharing around the challenges that you face and how you try and overcome them. I think it's really, I hope it's really interesting for listeners to listen to, especially those that are in a similar boat. So thanks again. You know that I love working with you and the team, and we will continue hopefully to work a long time forward and together help make the world better.
Yeah, well, thank you, Bora, and to the entire team there at Megadeals. You guys are great. You've got an excellent culture, and we all, I think, share a passion for making the world better and having it be a more positive place and a smart place, and we appreciate that.
Awesome, Jef. Thank you. Take care.
All right.